Hello, everybody who is watching now or later. First off, I'm going to say for anyone who is familiar with my channel at all, this is kind of, it's not a big deal for me. It's kind of a way for me to communicate with my readers right now. So it's very chill. I have no makeup on. I've been working all day. I'm just here to kind of chat about some stuff for the Malfunction trilogy, some details that I kind of wanted to, I guess, like give my thoughts on. Um, so before I go any further, I'm just going to say, like, if you're not familiar with me and you're not familiar with the Malfunction trilogy and you have any desire whatsoever to read it, like, I'm not going to sit here and give you a description. Like, if you have not read the trilogy, you probably don't want to be listening in. Unless you're someone like me and you're in it more for the journey than for the spoilers, and the spoilers actually kind of make you want to enjoy it more. But yeah, it's your choice. You can do whatever you want. But yeah, if you have not read the trilogy yet, there are major spoilers. So yeah, no one. I've got no reviews about this. I've got no comments about this. I've got no input about this whatsoever, besides from my beta readers. But I kind of wanted to discuss my thought process. Connection's been out for a little over a week now, coming up on 2 weeks, I want to say. So I kind of wanted to chat about some of my plot choices, particularly concerning character deaths or lack thereof. So once again, major spoilers, but we'll just kind of go for it. I'm also going to say, like, the reason why this is live, um, as I was saying before, this is just kind of a way for me to communicate with my readers on a video format that I can share. It's not fancy. I don't edit. I can only edit on my phone, so the only editing I do is for like really short form stuff. So yes, we're just kind of chilling, and I've chosen a very appropriate mug of Tears of My Readers, a gift from my critique partner SM Holland, who gave it to me specifically because of this trilogy. But yeah, so if I could give this a name other than spoilers, spoiler alert, it would be Why Did Bass Die? Because, to be honest, when I was coming up on this trilogy, on the end of this trilogy, I was feeling like he should. That it was kind of the end of his arc as a protagonist, as a character, that Bass should die at the end of the trilogy. And I had some debate with some of my critique partners and some other readers. Hi, Abigail. Abigail is risking spoilers. I don't think you've read it yet, so I hope this doesn't ruin it for you. But I appreciate your support either way. So we're talking about character deaths. So yes, I talked with my critique partners. I talked with a few Phoenix Fiction members who'd read the books before, and I'd asked them before. I'm like, look, do you want to be spoiled for the end of the trilogy? Like, are you okay with that? And it was, Abigail says, my dad watches the special features before the actual film, so I'm used to spoilers. Yes. I actually just mentioned earlier, I don't know if you were there yet, but when I see spoilers, I actually want to watch or read more often than not, unless it's like a thriller, because I like the experience. And sometimes it's good not having the anxiety that goes along with the experience. But yeah, so I was discussing with some of my critique partners and readers about these particular character deaths, about particularly the main three. So for the most part, I had multiple people agree that Bass should die. And then I had a few people who say, look, if Bass doesn't die, then Cowell should die. Like, pretty definite Cowell should die. Nobody really voted for Minerva to die. I think, especially for those who are up to date and they knew that she was pregnant, and that there were kids involved, they understood the need for her to be there. And then beyond that, kind of her role as a leader of humanity, basically, at this point, that people needed her, that she needed to survive, not just for her child, for her kids at the end of the series, but for the sake of the human race. So there wasn't any votes for Minerva. But one of the reasons why I really struggled with this, and I have my notes, they're not very thorough, but one of the reasons I really struggled with this is because I had done a lot of research on my target audience, the kind of people who enjoy the books that I write, who enjoy darker fiction, who enjoy dystopian and science fiction, and who enjoy a lot of the comp titles that I put for Malfunction. And the general consensus that I was hearing was that people hate plot armor. They dislike it, especially in my particular genre, when the main characters all make it out alive, or the people that you're supposed to care about. And so we did have some major character deaths. There were side characters. So Dennis died, and Victor died, and Ilya died. And Ilya was a bigger character in the rewrites, but I don't do well with large casts because I like to go so detailed. So yeah, had character deaths. It wasn't quite the bloodbath that Disintegration was. And then again, I guess there was probably more deaths in Disintegration. So I have a few more comments. Abigail says, it's so fascinating to talk about the possibilities of a book's direction, especially in its raw form. Yes, thank you. Love triangles and plot armor too. Don't ever do. Yes. So yeah, plot armor is like a big no-no. But I didn't want to lose my big three. And it was more than just an emotional attachment to them. So a big thing for me for writing is theme. And you'll find this, with any of the Phoenix fiction writers. That's kind of the reason why we all work so well together, is that theme is forefront in our writing. We're all Christians, but that doesn't, like, when I'm talking about theme, I don't mean preachiness, although some of them are specifically Christian fiction writers, but more the message that the story is giving, that it ends with hope, even if it's a dark story, that it has a positive impact for the world, and that it's not just shock value. And I do believe that can happen, especially like if you look at E.B. Dawson, my other critique partner. Some of her stories are tragedies. They end with main character deaths or with major tragic things happening, but they're still hopeful. And so I do believe that you can have a hopeful tragedy, even if you have like not a redemptive death, even if it's like a bad death. But so that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this. Like, I do have some level of plot armor, and it almost went against, other than Beth Wangler, who was like, if you kill everyone, I'm going to feel like I was cheated at the end of this book, and I'm going to cry so hard. So Beth Wangler was kind of the only one who told me, like, don't kill everybody. But yeah, I kind of went against popular consensus on this. I went with my gut, and I decided that it was more important for me to have my three main characters at the end. And I kind of wanted to talk about my thought process with each of those, like why it was so important, especially Bass, because I feel like all of my readers have this gut feeling going in that Bass is going to die. And that's part of the reason why I chose not to kill him. And I'll talk about that when I get to my notes at the very bottom, because I feel like that's the most important part of this discussion. So Abigail says, I think that's one of the reasons that PFW has phenomenal content. Thank you. Has the phenomenal content that it does, because you guys are wholly set on having that balance that is necessary for good writing. Yeah, it's, I love my fellow PFW authors. And that's not to say that other authors don't do that well, but it's kind of the central point of PFW. But yeah, anyway, so the first thing I kind of wanted to talk about was positive fiction. And I write dark fiction. Like, I write horror, and I write cyberpunk, and I write hard science fiction, and I write all these genres which are technically like darker. And if you look at the other stories that are in these genres, like, it's pretty typical for the main character to die a horrible, gruesome, bloody, hopeless death at the end of horror. Like, I just finished reading Turn of the Screw. And as a nanny, oh my goodness, that broke my heart. If you guys ever are on the Discord or want to scroll through the book club, you can see some of my over dramatic reactions to that. But so I write in genres that are typically darker and that typically have that shock value over message. So if you think about and like, look, The Expanse is my favorite show. I love it. But The Expanse is going to choose a shock to up the stakes before they choose to be gentle and kind to their viewers. I don't write epic fantasy, but that's how I started out. So if we're talking about epic fantasy, like Song of Ice and Fire, yeah, his goal is to shove the knife in and twist it as much as possible, and he doesn't care how much it hurts. And cyberpunk, like, the whole genre is like sex, drugs, and people dying in the pits of despair. And it seems to begin and end there. Like, it's like, and by the way, I brand Malfunction as a dystopian, and dystopian traditionally, like, and I'm talking about traditional dystopian, not the YA craze. Traditional dystopian ends in the pits of despair. So it seems logical that I'm writing these things, and that I should follow through with that. Like, it almost feels like I'm being too much of a coward to not follow through with that. But at the same time, as an author and as a reader, I don't like to read books where the main characters die at the end without reason. Like, if I feel like it's just to make me feel like crap, I don't want to read that. Like, I don't want to feel like crap at the end of a book. So if you're just trying to make me cry, or you're trying to shock me, like, and it depends on the genre I'm reading. Like, yeah, like A Turn of the Screw, I didn't feel angry at it for making me, like, kind of jerking the chain a little bit at the end, because it's a horror. That's, I gotta expect that from horror. But at the same time, I would much prefer, like, I mean, I still rave about the Netflix show Haunting of Hill House, which is really dark. And a lot of horrible emotional things happen. And at the end, the director was like, I was going to end with it being clear that it was a bad ending, and yet he shifted it to be a positive ending, because it was important to him that through all of this, these characters earned their happy ending. So yeah, I think that it's possible to achieve hope and to achieve a positive feeling with a tragic end. But my goal as a writer is to leave my readers in a better place. I want to get their brains going. I want to get them thinking and asking questions. Yes, I want to make them uncomfortable so those questions go further than the surface level. I think that's a major part of dystopian, is that you want to make people uncomfortable so they ask the hard questions. But I'm not going to do that by crushing their souls. And I'm not going to go against my themes for that either. So Abigail's got a few more comments here. She says, it's nice to have fiction that branches outside of those stereotypes. Yes. I mean, who wants to read the same book over and over again? Like, yes, that might be that might be how you make money, but yeah. And then she also says, no, do not try to make me feel like crap at the end. We've got life to do that for us. Yes, thank you. Books are supposed to be an escape. Yeah. Don't knock on escapist fiction. And Abigail says yes, and that's what I've loved about your content. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So positive fiction. And then I also kind of want to talk about realism in fiction, because a lot of times when we approach this plot armor thing, it's about like, that's what is realistic. And like, I understand. I love hard sci-fi, and Malfunction is in many ways, like, I hesitate to call it that because I'm not a scientist and I'm sure I have plenty wrong, but I did my research to try and keep like one foot firmly on the ground, even when I was in space. So I understand the desire to have realism in fiction, but at the same time, like, yeah, like kind of like Abigail just said in her comment, real life will do that for us. Like, why do I need to open a book and enter someone else's life just to have the same emotions and the same feelings that I'm having in real life? And as much as I love dark fiction, like in the last year and a half, guys, I've been watching like fluff cooking shows and Downtown Abbey and comedies. I've been watching romantic comedies, guys. I hate romance. I hate romantic comedies. And I have been actively seeking out romantic comedies so I can just turn off my brain and cook dinner and not be just rushed with the weight of everything I have to do. And I think a lot of people out there after 2020 and 2021 understand that feeling. So yeah, there has to be a reason. There has to be a reason why these things are happening in fiction. We make very deliberate choices in fiction. And to life, as a Christian, I believe that there is an author and a perfecter of life, and that the things that are happening randomly are not happening randomly, but are happening for a reason. And that gives me a lot of comfort. So to be able to open a book and to feel safe in an author's hands, and to feel like they know what they're doing, and to feel like their desire is to leave me nourished and creatively fulfilled and in a better place, that's a good feeling. But if I open a book and I feel like an author's just trying to like dump me in the deep end, like, no, I don't want that. And I don't want to give that experience to my readers. So, and kind of my third point along with that, and when we're talking about hopeful fiction, and we're talking about realistic fiction, like, yes, I want my fiction realistic to some point, but at the same time, I'm going to be in control of my fiction, and I'm not going to, so if any of you guys are familiar with Pierce Brown and the Red Rising trilogy, he has one character who dies. He literally put names in a hat and just pulled it out. And he had plans for this character through the rest of the series, like cool plans through the rest of the series. And he decided to kill this character because he pulled that out of a hat. Because he wanted us to feel like anything could happen to anyone. I get that. And it worked well enough for that trilogy. And I understand why he chose to do that. But I'm never going to do that. Never. One of the main reasons why I would not do that, especially in the Malfunction trilogy, is because the entire theme and message of the Malfunction trilogy is about how we dehumanize and devalue people in order to reach our goals. And that can happen in small ways, like how I find myself getting angry at someone who's driving a car and cuts me off in traffic, right? And how I will minimize them into like an idiot or, that kind of stuff. Because I don't want to deal with the fact that they're a human being. I just want to be angry at them. And look, I get that's not a big deal. I mean, it's not a good practice, but it's not a big deal. But we see in our world how extreme that can get. And so agree with it, me or not, abortion is a major theme in the Malfunction trilogy. And the idea that we scientifically can prove that the developing embryo is a human being. And yet we come up with all of these arguments, say it's a clump of cells. So am I. I'm still a clump of cells. Or, all these arguments to justify the murder of another living human being. So, like, if you want to come to me and try to argue the morality or whether or not that person in the womb is a person, you can go ahead. But scientifically, like, if you come at me with a scientific argument, I'm going to win every time, because scientifically, that is a human being. And then another major theme is the sex trafficking trade, the human trafficking in general. And it's not always in sex trafficking, but for me, one of the important things was to wrap up in the character of Bass being controlled by computers, being controlled by other human beings, and losing the autonomy of his own body, of how, like, not just in being able to buy cheaper stuff at Walmart, like, we're willing to enslave people, and we always have been willing to, but also, like, that, like, if you guys did any research into Pornhub, like, anyone who supported the concept of Pornhub could not anymore. There are 14, 15-year-old children who have been kidnapped, put into sex trafficking, raped on camera, and people are going on Pornhub. There is testimony of girls who have gotten out of that situation, gone to school, and been recognized from peers in their school who have been watching their rape on video for free. And when they ask Pornhub to take it down, Pornhub refuses. There is no way to justify porn and to say that is empowering to women, or that it is sexual freedom. Like, take that somewhere else. And these are kind of, when I'm saying these are things that I don't normally say to people, because it's drawing lines in the sand and I don't want to rock the boat too much. But I say them in fiction. And if you are reading that, like, you don't have to dig too far to find those themes. So those are two major themes. But, it breaks down in a million different ways. The way we talk to each other, the way we assign value to people, ends versus means. So because those are major themes of the Malfunction trilogy, for me to turn around in the end and just slaughter everybody for the sake of not having plot armor was a betrayal of the theme of this story. The theme that life was valuable. And if I didn't feel like those characters absolutely needed to die, I wasn't going to do it. And that's not to say I killed plenty of characters, and some of them in horrible ways. Capricorn died horribly. Oh, poor guy. But those were necessary to further the plot and the theme, and I wasn't going to just slaughter people just to give someone a thrill when they're reading the book, or just to make them feel like it was more realistic. So I'm going to pause before I kind of get into the detail of each of the choices of my characters. So Abigail has left a lot of awesome comments. Let's see if I can go through them. She's saying realism has its place, but it also has its boundaries. Yes, thank you. If you can make things make sense without 100% accuracy, it's going to be okay. You're here to give the reader an emotional experience, not just an encyclopedia. Very true. Not just an encyclopedia. Like, even just in the way we have conversations in fiction, we cut out all of the, like, awkward will, and I add a lot of that back in for sake of the type of fiction I write, deep POV and conversational. But, like, I'm on the heavy side of that for authors. Authors don't want that kind of crap in their books because that's extraneous. Like, you guys probably get irritated by all the ums and hemming and hawing that I have on talking to the camera. That hat draw is such a weird and interesting idea, but you're right. So she's talking about the Red Rising and Pierce Brown thing. I couldn't do it either. I love how you just put it. Thank you. What a powerful message to include. Thank you. I love how that ends up being a wild draw 4 in your favor. So she's got a few things out there. Pornhub gets a lot of it, and a few voices aren't enough to form a resistance against it. Yeah, we need to be open and clear and honest about what's going on. She says it's interesting that it's coming up for you now, though, because there's definitely a reason for it. Let it come up. Thank you. Yes. I'm not ashamed of what I believe. Definitely. I'm not going to beat people over the head with it, but like, if you're here wondering why I did what I did, like, I'm going to tell you why I did what I did. Okay, so I want to get into like the particular characters now. And my tea is getting cold, so I'm going to take a sip. I'm going to get into the particular characters and why I chose not to kill them. So Minerva is the first one. That's easy. Minerva is at the end of the series. She's the only thing standing between humanity and death. She's the obvious fallback of power because she was chosen by Pope. So she's the next Pope. She has the intelligence and the knowledge to be able to pull things off, and she has the compassion for all the different sides of the rifts. So she's the most obvious choice. And while that's not to say that, if I was continuing the series, I could probably pull up someone somewhere. I killed most of the people who probably could have taken that role. Yeah, like I said, there's a reason why I have this mug. So for her, it was an obvious choice of like, she's the leader of the hub. She's the leader of humanity. And if I killed her, her kids would probably be dead, for one. I can't imagine either of the boys like having any understanding or intelligence on how to raise the kids. So, so I couldn't just pull her out, and if I did, there would have been like a huge cliffhanger question of like, okay, there is no one left alive who is close to the main characters who could raise these kids well, and there's no one left alive who we know of who could take her role. So she can't go anywhere. And I don't think people are expecting her to go anywhere. There's definitely, I've not seen any readers suggest that they don't expect Minerva to make it through. Even in the first book. So the second one is Cowl. Why didn't Cowl die? And Cowl, I was debating between Bass and Cowl for a long time. And I had several people, like even my critique partner who loves Cowl the most and was like screaming and pulling her hair out because she didn't want me to kill Cowl. She named her cat after him. Even she was kind of like, yeah, Cowl needs to die. It's okay if Cowl dies. It seems like he needs to die. But so the major theme of Connection was healing. Like they've been through all this crap, and like, yes, they were in a lot more crap in Connection. It's not like it's just a straight theme of healing. But I wanted the message to kind of come through that healing was possible, not just for individuals, not just for people to be able to learn how to view other people as human beings on the same level as them, but for individual wounds and pain. And Cowl, I'm not going to say he's the most wounded character, because Bass is definitely the most wounded character. But as much as like Bass is like confused and doesn't quite understand how to deal with other people, and as much damage as he has from being raised as the super soldier in that particular context, Bass has compassion still, and it became kind of this theme with the Borgs in general. And I don't think this is unilaterally true for human beings, but because they had suffered so much, they had a great capacity for empathy in general. Like, we don't see that with every single one, but in general, as a people group, they had that capacity for empathy because they had suffered so much. So in many ways, Cowl, even though he wasn't, it's not like he had the most to heal from, he had the most growth the biggest gap to maturity as a character, the biggest growth arc. Going from just being so intensely dependent on other people and so terrified of abandonment, and so it was so important to him not to lose anything and anyone he loves, and he did not care at all about anyone else. And by the end of that trilogy, like, he's still that way in a lot of ways, but he's grown so much, and he lost so much. Like, he just kept getting abandoned again and again and again. And through the course of the book, like, he loses his best friend multiple times, both of them. He loses his arm. He's faced with his greatest fear constantly. And to bring him through that and not even fully complete the arc, like, have him just on the edge of that possibility of becoming that mature leader who can step in and care about other people and see other people and be able to actually provide for the needs of other people instead of just like clinging to what he has so he doesn't lose it. Like, he finally apologized, I think for the first time in the entire series, like, genuinely apologized at the end of Connection. So to bring him to that point and have him just on the edge, like, sure, one of the tricks of making deaths more heartbreaking is to not allow them to complete their character arc and reach their goals. But at the same time, I didn't want to just have a heartbreaking death, and it felt wrong to cut him off from that. And then from a logistical and plot, like, Disintegration was Cowell's book. That's where he had the most character growth. That's where he had the strongest voice. That's where the plot revolved around him the most. Connection was Bass's book. And to kill Cowell, I would not be satisfied in doing it in any way less than just like he would have to sacrifice himself in this incredible, powerful way. And it could not just be him sacrificing himself for Bass, because we all know he's willing to do that. He would step in front of a bullet for Bass or for Minerva any day, and it would not be a character growth for him. It would just be him holding on to Bass in the same way he has through the entire book, the entire trilogy. So it wouldn't be character growth to kill him that way. He would have to have a sacrificial death for the entire human community. And in doing that, he would take the plot away from Bass, and it would halt the forward progression of the story. So just from a logistical standpoint, like, it didn't work. It would have to be Bass because it was Bass's book. So the only way that it could work from a plot-wise and to allow the focus to still be on Bass and not to switch to Cowell and halt progress was to make Bass the one who died. Which is, and honestly, that's what everyone expects. Like, that's what they've expected. Like, from the very first book, the very first reader feedback I was getting from beta readers, from comments, from emails, was, I'm going to be so upset if you kill Bass. I'm going to be so sad if you kill Bass. Like, you're going to kill Bass, aren't you? It's what people expect, because it's a format that we kind of expect. And I want to talk about that a little bit more with Bass. But yeah, so I chose to allow Cowell to live because I felt like it was important for the theme. I felt like it was important for his character, and I felt like it was important for the forward progression of the book, not to halt. And then, yeah, I guess to just add to that, to tear that kind of hole in the very fragile stability of Minerva and Bass at the end of that book, Bass in particular, I wouldn't be able to end it in a hopeful, positive, like, all's well ending. Like, you wouldn't feel like the story was over, because Bass would just be torn to shreds. So it was important to have an actual ending and not just like, oh yeah, everyone is mourning and it's a tragedy and it's just a battlefield. And by the way, they somehow have to pull themselves together enough to like make sure everyone else survives. Woohoo. That's not an ending. So yeah, I'm going to check the comments again. Abigail says, I just went through leadership training and this guy sounds like a legend. Cowell, huh? Yeah, he's something. And then Abigail says, it's so beautifully, abundantly clear that you went above and beyond in the series. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's when I say it's a huge deal that connection is out now. Like, it's a huge deal. I put so much into this. And I've set the bar pretty high for myself, I suppose, because I don't intend to stop here. But I'm really excited for what comes. And I hope that readers can enjoy what I've put into it. All right, so the final character, Bass. Why didn't Bass die? And everyone, like I said, I've said this a million times now, so I don't even need to say it again. But why people were expecting him to die, the format that you get from such a character, this tragic hero, this person whose past is so broken, whose life is just this accumulation of agony after agony after agony, who questions his own humanity so many times, and we see in connection how much that's depicted against the backdrop of Eris, who has that similar pain because, as a Borg, and she can actually hear him, and Bass can hear her back. For anyone who if you've read it other than Abigail, like Abigail, there's a hive mind. And Eris is nuts. Let's just leave it that way. You'll understand if and when you are able to read it. But so we see some of that backdrop of Bass struggling to come to grips with whether or not he's still even human, because there's been so much trained out of him, and there's been so much damage and so much pain in his life. And I think that's the reason why healing was so important for me in this book, particularly for Bass. All the other characters needed it as well, and humanity in general needed it, but Bass in particular needed to know that healing was possible, that it's hard to fight for, but it's possible. So I've had multiple friends, and I'm sure a lot of other people have this similar story, but I've had multiple friends who have either been suicidal or who have attempted, and close friends. And a theme that I hear coming up a lot with that is that they feel like irreparable damage has been done. They lose hope. They lose hope from healing. And I feel like this is especially true of men. That there's this idea of like, I'm so damaged. Why even bother to try when I'm just going to die anyways? Like, why fight so hard to heal when it's easier to just give up? And whether that giving up comes in the form of death, or comes in the form of suicide, or comes in the form of something else, of just like disappearing into video games. Like I said, it's so common with men, and I definitely struggled with that as well. Not with the suicidal tendencies, but with the idea of especially after my mom passed, of why bother trying to be better? Why bother trying to heal? It's so hard. Why not just live with myself the way I am? And there's that sense of pervasive hopelessness. And so I felt for Bass, every time I thought about killing him, every time I thought about ending the story in his death, even a sacrificial death, even in which he gives himself for the entire hub. Like, that's been Bass from the beginning. He was trained that he stood between human beings and the enemy, and he was always the first one to run at and through danger. Like, one of the reason why Bass seems less intelligent, like, he's compared against Minerva and Cowell, who are both highly intelligent. But one of the reasons why he appears less intelligent in the series is because when it comes to strategizing, like, Bass has always been the pawn, And so when it comes to strategy, the only reason why he ever wins is because his strategy is just to like run full scale at the danger and hope that the amount of damage he accumulates is less than the amount of damage he causes, and usually takes people by surprise. So Bass's mentality has always been that, you know, he suffers and he takes the damage to protect others. That's been Bass since the beginning. So he almost needed the opposite in his arc, not to learn to be selfish, but to learn to view himself as a human being whose life has value. And there was one, I wonder, I even forget because I cut out, but there was one line I had in Disintegration I had to cut, and I had a Connection I had to cut, and I think I found a place for it. I'm not sure. But it was where Minerva asked Bass, and she's contemplating this idea of the end justify the means, you know, of allowing people to die to save other people, or actively killing people to save other people. Just asking, like, why was it okay for us to kill people who are coming after us when we were trying to escape? And he replied that it was because their lives had value. And she said, okay, so why is it okay now? And this was in Disintegration that it had happened. So that was when Bass had turned himself back in so that they could use his DNA to save humankind. And Bass's reply, her question was, why is it okay for you to sacrifice yourself now? Like, if we killed so many people so that we could stay free and alive, why is it okay for you to effectively do the opposite? And his reply was because their lives have value. And so for Bass, his arc was almost the opposite of Cowell, in which, like, Cowell was learning not to be selfish, and Bass was learning to value himself as a human being and to value his free will and value his choice. And that one of the major ideas of Disintegration was the idea that if you are using someone else for your own ends, then the ends don't justify the means. But if they are making the active choice to lay down their life for you, that is a beautiful and powerful thing. So Bass choosing to lay down his life to allow others to survive is a very different thing than Bass doing it because he believes that's what he was created for. That was his only purpose. So yeah, it comes down to, I kind of got off track, like talking about all these details of character development that I've gone through. But the basic idea of, if I allowed Bass to die at that point, I felt like I was justifying the concept that he was too damaged to survive, that he couldn't heal, that he had suffered so much. And one of his arcs in Connection was coming from this point of, like, I didn't expect to live and I don't know what to do now that I'm alive. Like, I feel like I'm dead. I feel like I wasn't supposed to survive. So how do I go on with life when I had expected? Because when he had turned himself back into the government, he felt like he was giving up his life. He expected to die. So he didn't know what to do with himself. He already felt like a dead man walking. And to end his life at the end of Connection, even with a complete character arc, even with him having a family and having love and having learned to value himself and to value individual people and to taste the sweetness of what life was, and that it was worth something. To kill him at that point, it felt like I was driving in the message that despite all of that growth and all of that hard work, he was too damaged to survive. And I've heard authors even say this before. Like, he had to die. He had been through too much. He was too damaged to survive. And yeah, like I said, I've had so many close friends who have attempted suicide. I've worked with so many damaged children who felt like they didn't have a future. There was one little boy when I first came home to the States, and I was working at a inner city ministry in Grand Rapids. And one little boy, when he was asked what he wanted to do when he grew up, he wanted to sell DVDs. Like, that was his dream. And he ended up being killed in a drive-by shooting. And I to kill Bass and to justify that mentality that they're too damaged. Even if someone didn't read that book and come to that conclusion, even if that was just in my own mind, like, I couldn't do that. I couldn't justify that. So Bass had to live. And even if it went against everyone's expectations, and even if people get to the end of it and they're like, oh, I hate this series now because plot armor, there's no way they could have gone through that battle and everyone survived. Even if that is the reaction to people, I would rather that be the reaction than to have one person pick it up and say, I'm too damaged to ever heal. I'm too damaged to ever have a good thing. So, yes. That is why I wanted to call this video, Why Didn't Bass Die? But that's too spoilery, so I just titled it Spoil. But yeah, so now if you're reading the book and you come to that point and you're thinking that I'm just a coward for not killing all my characters, and you come and stumble across this book for this video, and you come looking for my reasoning, like, it wasn't just that I was too much of a coward. Like, I put careful thought into this, and I couldn't do it. Who knows? If I end up writing the follow-up trilogy with the kids, I may end up killing one of them then. I might. I haven't planned that far, but I'm not going to just do it willy-nilly because it shocks people. Yeah, I care about these characters. I care about this world, but more importantly, I care about my readers and the message that I'm putting out into the world, and I want this to last beyond myself. I don't want to just make money off this. I want this to be art that lasts beyond me. And if the message that I am leaving is that if you are damaged and broken, then there's nothing you can do about it. You might as well just lay down and die. That I don't want to be remembered with that message. So yeah, Bass lives. I'm going to stop for comments and for civility. I've been going on for 45 minutes. Iced tea. Wonderful. So let's see. Abigail has left quite a few wonderful comments again. I love having Abigail hang out. I'm glad that you came and hung out even though you were getting an earful of spoilers. So she said that choice of story trajectory makes a lot of sense for Bass, and I love that you didn't just go with what was expected. Thank you. It is very hard to balance reader expectations with what the story needs. So many good character dynamics. Thank you so much. I love my characters. And she says such a powerful message. Thank you. I hope so. And honestly, like, if people know exactly what I'm saying without this video to tell them, I've probably done my job wrong. I need to be sneaky and subversive and creep into their brains until they think that my thoughts are theirs. Don't quote me on that, please. Okay, so final question, or final thought before I close this out. Why the blank years later trope, the 8 years later trope? So this is another thing that people hate. And I thought about cutting the epilogue because of this idea that, and people hate this in Harry Potter, that, so many years later and you see them older and married with their kids and happy. And that's not exactly how it goes in Connection. Like, you don't come back and see them happy. You come back and see Bass reacting to Jason, to his clone, having the same subjugating surgery that he had when he was 8 of implanting the bionic spine, so that Jason can survive. And so even though Jason is alive and Jason has a family and is growing up in a family. We step back into the family at a point of tragedy, of I'm laughing because I just saw Abigail's comment. Don't quote me on that, please. Jill 2021. If certain subgroups of people get a hold of this video, my career will be ruined before it starts, and it will be 100% worth it. Anyways, where was I? Yes. Okay. So why the blank years later trope? So we enter back in a point of tragedy for the family. And so I'm not a romance person, but Bass and Minerva are clearly, like, I don't think they're meant for each other. I think in a perfect world, if they hadn't been through so much abuse and drama and damage, they probably would not be interested in each other. But they kind of like come together as a couple because of their trauma. And I think there's something valuable in having relationships like that where they can support each other and help each other heal. Like, you need support to heal. But at the same time, I was really scared about having the message that romance solves all your ills. So I think one of the most common critiques I hear on this trope is that they don't want to hear this idea that healing and happiness and a happy ending means that everyone has kids and is married, and that's all well and good. Like, as a Christian and as a married woman and as a woman who desperately wants kids and can't have them, I don't see what's wrong with that. Sure, it might not be everybody's happy ending, but families are valuable, and I don't want to see those disappear. But that's not my point. My point is, I wanted to show, like, that it's healing is a constant battle. So just because Bass is free and he's surrounded by family and he's raising 3 beautiful children and he has all the people that he loves around him, and they're healing and they're growing and he's being treated as humans and as a human, and all of the boards are free, and there's still like complex politics and stuff like that. Like, I don't want to just have a polished, happy ending where everything's beautiful, which is a temptation because everyone's alive. Everyone. I'm sorry, Victor. I'm sorry, Dennis. Not everyone, but because all the main characters are alive, it's tempting to just be like, oh, look, it's a happy ending. We're all good. We'll wrap it up. But I didn't want that. And it felt like it was really important for me to show that, like, healing is a continual process. Healing doesn't go with, it's not that you go to therapy for a few weeks and suddenly all your issues are gone. It's not that you get on a certain drug and all your issues are gone. It's not that you get married and all of a sudden your mental illness and your trauma is gone. It doesn't work like that, especially when the trauma is part of your upbringing. And healing is worth fighting for, even if you never reach a finish line. And like, I will guarantee you there is never a human being who will walk up to you and say they have met anyone who does not need any growth as a human being, who never does anything wrong. Like, we say, like, I'm human. Human means we make mistakes. Human means that we have anxiety and depression and frustration and emotions. Even you can be sad and not be depressed, guys. Like, emotions are things that we deal with, and healing is always, we all need to heal continually. But especially when it comes to extreme trauma, I didn't want to leave the message that it was a one and done deal. That Bass had his family, he had his best friend, he had his people, and he was free of Eris and he was free of the Wreckers, so therefore he was good. He wasn't, and Minerva wasn't, and Cowell wasn't. Also the reason why I didn't give Cowl a bionic arm. That was fun to write. Gosh. Sure, I got a lot wrong. But yeah, so I wanted to show that. And I also wanted to show a little bit more of Bass and Minerva's relationship as a married couple and how they could meet each other's needs and support each other and love each other well, and yet still not fix each other. So that's why I chose to leave that in. And to be honest, part of it was because I have dragged my readers through so much crap. Such a difficult, dark series in so many ways. And I didn't think it was entirely bad to end with showing my characters happy. Even if they still need healing, even if it's still a traumatic moment in their family, even if they still have scars. I felt like it was important and it was good to end in a place where everyone was happy, even if it required a trope that people say they don't want. So I won't know for sure until I start getting more reviews. I haven't seen a lot of reviews. Yes, I'm one of those authors who still reads my reviews. Maybe in the future I won't, but for right now, I only have 2 reviews. And one of them is from my critique partner. So I won't know until reviews start coming in and I start seeing the reception. Like if people are like, "What the crap?" Like everyone lived, and even if they don't like it, I'm proud of it. And I have a lot more in my career coming up, and yeah. So one thing is a guarantee, though. I like my bittersweet endings, and there might be a tragedy here and there, but I'm not going to just go murdering people just because people say they like them. We don't like that. We just say that because we want to sound cool, to be honest. So yes, so if you are wondering why all my characters are alive and why I decided to go with plot armor, that is why in a hour-long story short. And yes, it's a long story short because that book is a very long book. So yes, let's see. Abigail, the theme of healing really carried this whole series, and it was fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, I hope it helps people. At the very least, I hope that people don't come out of my series feeling exhausted and bedraggled and like a wrung out rag from crying, even if it's dark. Abigail says, your whole reaction when talking about his arm was priceless. Yes. Guys, you have no clue how much you need like 2 arms for. Like I had some idea because when I was first originally writing this, the baby that I was in was still an infant, and so I had him in 1 arm, but I still had 2 arms. I just had one of them occupied at nearly everything I was doing. But yeah, writing a 1-armed man is difficult. I can see why so many science fiction writers are just like, hey, look, we have a bionic that we stuck on there, and it's like he never lost it. Priceless, trope of add some trauma, lose an arm, and have no effects from it whatsoever. She's laughing at me for saying an hour-long story short, yes. And that needs to be a t-shirt. Yeah, maybe I should throw one up in the merch shop. It definitely defines my brand. Okay, well, I'm going to go reheat my tea. And I'm going to be writing Tahiri, and I'm so close to the end of it. Hopefully by July, and maybe I'll have another book out this year, completely off-brand, having nothing to do with anything science fiction or horror. But, authors got to do what an author's got to do, and sometimes she's chasing rabbit trails. Imagine taking care of a baby with 1 arm. I know there are women and probably men who do it. Nothing but respect, man. It's hard enough with 1 baby with 2 arms. Anyways, okay, so Abigail keeps leaving comments, so you guys are going to have to read them for yourself because she's awesome. She says she's excited for Tahiri, so I should probably actually go write it. So I'm going to get off for now. It is my writing time. It's 9 o'clock. So I'm going to go write. But if you have watched this far, thank you. If you want to yell at me in the comments, go ahead and yell. And I need to go warm up my tea. So, bye.